Brent being surly
now
in Messenger.
We're streaming now to our audience. We're about to start our show, the shoe.
Can you turn your sound on your phone down or off?
I'm going to turn my mute your phone, please, people. You've been warned. Okay. All righty. You want the TV on?
I don't care.
Go, Frank.
Who wants the TV
Oh,
on?
it's time for the kiddies.
On? Who wants
on?
The TV on? Raise. Okay, there you go. Now, can we start,
Just
please?
one. Okay. All right. Mute is off. Oh, I don't like that over there. Shit, I don't want to get on the. It's going to stay there. Okay. Mute is off. We're going to go in 3, 2, 1, and.
Hi, Steve Gilmore here. This is the Gilmore Gang. And that's a wrap.
Well, thanks for coming.
Don't forget to tip your waitress. The Gilmore Gang today is brought to you by these medications, which have allowed my voice to somewhat rematerialize.
Yeah.
I'll help you with that, Steve.
Oh, okay, excellent. So what do I say next, Frank?
I'd like to say hello to, starting in the lower left-hand corner, from the great state of Arizona. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. From the great state of Georgia.
Marjorie
Yes.
Taylor Greene. Oh, sorry.
Oh, God.
All right. So that's Frank Radis in London. He was
Cheerio.
talking to Brent Leary in the great state of Georgia. Also in evidence, what? Do we have enough super time? From the great state of Seattle is Michael Markman.
How do you do? This is me stalling for my lower third, and I hope you've had a chance to read it.
Excellent. And I'm going to go around the horn again in just a second. Above him in my screen is from Palo Alto, Keith Tier. Welcome, Keith.
Nice to be here, Steve. And you did mention that it might be nice to, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but Twitter's announcements yesterday were pretty interesting. We'll see.
Okay. And then last but not least is Dennis Pompriant. Welcome, Dennis.
Greetings. It's nice to be here. How are you all?
How are we all?
We're great. I'm great. I don't know about everyone.
How are all you all?
Y'all.
Y'all.
All y'all.
Y'all.
So,
You know what they call Georgia now? It's called Yollywood.
Yeah.
Is that
I
true?
didn't know that.
That's true. Yeah, because they shoot
Really?
so many films being shot. Well, at least there were.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, Tyler Perry opened up his big new studio and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got some of the best tax incentives for filmmakers in America now.
Well, that's it. I'm starting my own theater company now. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, production company anyway.
Well, that too.
So we kind of blew the intro here, which was to package up what everybody thinks would be an interesting thing to talk about. So I think Keith did it. Anybody else want to raise your hand and suggest a topic? Go ahead, Dennis.
I think in keeping with this show's amalgamation of entertainment and technology and politics, I think we should talk about what's going on politically as a remake of a Mel Brooks movie, which will tentatively call Springtime for Idiots in Washington.
Or in Florida, where CPAC is.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I don't
No
think you
limits.
could do a remake of Blazing Saddles nowadays. So.
Oh yeah. for
Well,
sure.
maybe they could do the fart scene.
Don't they do that every day?
There you go.
Uh,
Thanks, Frank.
Brent, putting you on the spot. Any things that you want to bring up this week?
No, I'll just go with what everybody else has to say.
Excellent. Michael Markman.
Do you want to talk about the filibuster? Will we ever lose it?
Well, that's kind of politics, so I think there's a good chance that that'll happen. And Frank Radis.
The blockbuster is dead. Thank you.
What do you mean, the Hollywood blockbuster?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Well, this year anyway. As I go, I kind of touched on this last week, but I didn't dive into it. But as I've been getting further and further into the awards, the Directors Guild Awards DVDs and files that I've been screening, there are not that I've seen yet. There are no blockbusters. There are no giant productions. They're really incredibly well written, story driven, almost want to say old fashioned movies that require your attention, and there's some really good ones. And my sense of it is that it's kind of nice because it requires less sort of agita and angst, and they're easier to watch, and I'm really enjoying them. And there's some that are just really superior right now. There's movies that you wouldn't have expected. Movies made. There's one called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Oh yeah,
story. Oh my God, it is unbelievably good. It was a Broadway show, but it was filmed as a narrative film. Excellent. There was one called A Promising Young Woman. Blew me away. I thought, as soon as I read the title, I thought it was a chick flick. And then I watched it, and it was one of those ones where things happened that you didn't expect. It was just well written and well produced. So there's a lot of those movies out there right now. And given the fact that movie theaters, although New York just announced that they're going to open up movie theaters again, I think on next week, on the 5th, movie theaters are going to reopen. But the fact that there are no big movie theaters, it doesn't require that you need a big movie theater to see some of these great movies. There's this movie called Nomadland that is spectacular. You're looking at Tina. Did you guys have a conversation about that? I'm just saying.
Yeah, on the show last week. Where were you?
I was there. Did we talk about that last week? It was just so. It was.
I think it was.
No, it was on our family call. Actually.
Oh, it was right. We have a family call.
Wait a minute. So is your family call really the Gilmore Gang? I mean, it's a bunch.
It
of
is.
Yeah, that is the Gilmore Gang. Anyway, that's all I have. I mean, that's the
I have a question for you, Frank.
Yeah.
I don't know this since I've never been sent screeners. It would seem to me that you don't need to send screeners for blockbusters. I would think that typically it's the smaller films that would need to send out screeners to people. I mean, because everybody knows Marvel Infinity War and Endgame. So I wonder if the screeners that get sent out every year are the more interesting films that don't get onto everybody's radar because of massive marketing.
Well, they send a screener for everything anyway, and either a screener is sent or it's a file that you get every couple of days, 3 or 4 more pop up in my email. And there's a place on the internet that you go to. It's called a Passport Screener, and every single one of the films, even the ones you've gotten DVD screeners for, they put them on there too. So everything gets put on there. So no, literally everything is set up so that you have to be able to watch it, and so they know that you've watched it too, because they're watermarked, and if and by the way, they also know if you've lent them to somebody and they play them on a system that's connected to the internet. They know. It's really weird. you're not allowed to share. You're not supposed to share them. You're not supposed to show them in large groups in your house, which nobody would do now anyway. But there's no difference now. I will say that that the DVD screeners are already sort of going away in the world of awards, and what you're going to get from now on is going to be files. You won't be getting the DVDs. The DVDs have always been nice, but honestly, they're difficult to get rid of. But no, everything gets is a screener one way or another.
But that's not really what you're observing. What you're observing is that the big machine movies are going away, and
well, this year for sure,
as you stated, because the emotional connection that audiences are looking for right now is calming, not shoot 'em up.
I think that's the point, and I kind of like it. It's really nice. I've been watching like 2 movies every single day for the last, I guess, 10 days now. So I'm up to like 20 movies so far. I got about 30 more that I have to watch. Half of them I've never heard of.
Have you seen One Night in Miami?
Yes, I have. I love it.
It's kind of a bookend to Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. It's a very similar theme in a different era.
Yeah, I loved it. But I will. It's funny because where I learned about the movie Mank was on this show, I guess a month or so ago. I think Keith brought it up. I don't know. Maybe it was you, Michael.
I think it was.
I don't know. But was it you, Brent? In any case, it still shines as one of the great movies from a director's perspective of all the movies that I've seen so far this year.
Which one?
Mank.
Oh, Mank, yeah.
It's the story of Mankiewicz, who wrote the screenplay for Citizen Kane for Orson Welles. It's funny too because I worked with one of his relatives, Josh Mankiewicz, at ABC for years. I mean, I years and years and years, and it's just like I never actually connected it until I got years into it and realized, oh my God, this guy is the grandson of one of the most famous reprobate writers of our day. Anyway, it's of that day. Well, I don't know. I was born in
not
the 40s.
My day, bud.
Yeah, but I so as I said when I saw your post today of the LL Cool J song, man, I'm old.
One of Mank's most famous screenplay contributions is uncredited. He was the one who said, you ought to put a black and white bookend over The Wizard of Oz. Opening up The Wizard of Oz on the farm in black and white and ending it on the farm in black and white and then going to color when she's in Oz. That was Mankiewicz.
Brilliant. I mean, the guy's contributions to the film world in the late 30s to the mid 40s was unbelievable. He was really a tour de force. And like I said, I think that movie that's going to come out with some really big awards. I wouldn't be surprised if it wins the DGA award. I wouldn't be surprised if it wins an Oscar. That's what's going on. Although I was going to add the Golden Globes, but the Golden Globes are in such trouble right now, except for the fact that that's a great party to watch. It's an absolute sham of an award.
Did you watch the Ruffalo TV series that about the 2 brothers? I forget what it's called.
I didn't see that yet, but I did see the Ruffalo movie about the it was about the water situation in one of those towns near a power plant, a coal plant. Yeah. It was spectacular. It was really good, and yet another story-driven film. So I'm really upbeat about the direction that Hollywood is taking and the fact that people are having an opportunity. But I did not see that TV series. I'm not.
He plays both roles. He plays both brothers. One is kind of slightly autistic and overweight, and the other one is normal Ruffalo. And it's a 6-part series. It's on Amazon Prime, and he will win awards for it. He's a really, really good actor.
He sure is. I agree with that. I don't. I'm going to go look it up because I'm not familiar with it. But he's a great actor, and you know, whether he's playing the Hulk in the universe of the Marvel type stuff, or playing, you know, a character, he's a terrific actor. And that's another thing. This is a real actor's year too. I mean, Frances McDormand comes off just brilliantly, as does the guy who plays Mank. I don't know. I just blanked out. But there's so many great actors also. It's not just about the directors. It's about the actors, and it's about the production, and it's about the writers, and it's about the directors. This is a good year for storytelling.
Now, Frank, you got through all of that saying that not a good year for blockbusters, but you never blamed COVID. How come?
Well, no, actually, I would say that COVID played a. First of all, the movies that you're watching right now were probably all made more than a year ago anyway. It's interesting that you say that. The point is that there was the blockbusters. There was only one blockbuster this year that I can recall, and that was the Wonder Woman movie, and it was horrible. And it was terrible. And that was, interestingly enough, was part of that whole idea of releasing something in a movie theater at the exact same time you released it. It happened to be HBO Plus, you know, in the stream. I think they
thought
knew
that worked really well, actually.
I did too,
because
but
it was essentially free, which is what it was worth.
Well,
You know, I
yeah.
have a friend.
you're right about the production calendar, but the fact is that films that were produced that were intended to be blockbusters were simply not released.
Not
because of
released.
COVID.
Yeah.
So
that's the reason.
There were blockbusters. They just didn't have any blocks to bust.
They tried with Tenet, I thought, and I thought that was a really good movie too, by the way. I enjoyed that movie. It was good.
That's Denzel's son, right?
Yeah, he's terrific. And it was a really good movie, but I don't think it busted through. It didn't. And I think that's because of COVID. So a lot of things that COVID did that interfered with, you know, couldn't see him in the movie theater, probably didn't get released because of COVID. Those are some of the reasons why the virus affected the box office.
Well,
Dennis, why did you ask that question?
Well, there's a lot of logistics that goes on to making a movie. I have a friend who just shot a TV movie in a week on Cape Cod for next season, and you know, she had to quarantine for 2 weeks before getting together with the cast and crew, and there was another week of shooting. I could just imagine. I mean, this was a TV movie, so I could just imagine things becoming exponentially more complicated for anything approaching blockbuster status.
Yeah. Well, remember Tom Cruise and the blow up he had on his set with someone who was not wearing a mask. Clearly, they're filming a blockbuster, and that actually put the put a big arrow. It put a big target on the blockbusters. You go to a blockbuster film, they produce them the way you would imagine a blockbuster to be produced. First of all, any decent film is probably a pretty large crew anyway, but a blockbuster is even bigger, and it's, you know, it's every imaginable union that gets involved in producing a blockbuster, including they have a guy called the Green Man, which is an IATSE job, and the Green Man's job is to do nothing but move the plants on the set. There are so many people that have to be on those sets because of the union contract. So the blockbusters are usually produced. I don't think I can think of even one that wasn't produced by one of the major studios that wasn't, you know, a full on union extravaganza, an army, hundreds of people on the set.
I think that's why Star Wars is done in London, to avoid that.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I think that, you know, when I think they post-produce it, and the post-production is done. I want to say it's done in America,
It's done
I'm
around
not-
the world.
Yeah.
If you go through
Oh,
the
that's
credits,
right. Yeah.
those
Yeah,
post
yeah.
houses are in Asia. They're in Hollywood. They're in Canada. They take so much labor that no one special effects house can cover it all.
In the early days, of course, it was, ILM, and that was it. It's way more than ILM now, that's for sure.
But the other reason that a lot of shows wind up in England are because of tax advantages that the UK makes. I mean, in budgeting a film that has British content, either shot in England or employing British crew or British cast, gets tax advantages that a Hollywood production doesn't get. So that has a lot to do with why people choose to locate their productions in the UK.
And
I did not know
they're
that.
building a brand new studio, a huge facility out near near Heathrow. And of course there's Pinewood. There's big studios here that can do all of that work.
What Georgia is doing now, the UK pioneered.
Yeah. The lady who did the New York State tax abatement situation years ago did the same thing for Georgia. It ran out, I think, in New York, and then she went down to Georgia and did. She happens to be the wife of Lloyd Kaufman, who is the CEO of Troma Entertainment, which is the company that made the Toxic Avenger and some of those crazy B movies. There's those George Romero knockoffs.
Hey, by the way, Frank, Gary Oldman played Mink.
Yeah, Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
He was just spectacular. Who, and by the way, was on the One Show last night. Keith,
The what
in case
show?
you missed it. The One Show. It's you'd be surprised at what happens on British television between 7 o'clock and 10 o'clock. The kinds of shows that are on. Occasionally, there are a lot of there's a lot of cooking shows. There's a lot of dancing on ice and dancing and game shows. Tremendous number of game shows. Crazy. You would watch it and go, this is never going to work in America. This would never work in America. But it works here.
I watched. Do you know Stanley Tucci?
Oh yeah, I hear that show's great.
CNN, Searching for Italy on CNN. A friend of mine, Eve, I'm forgetting her second name, was the producer on it. And I watched it last night. If you just love Italian food, you have to watch it, and Italy.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been watching it, and I loved it so much. I made pasta carbonara for lunch yesterday, just for myself.
We had pasta carbonara for dinner last night.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
He's an oenophile. Is that how you pronounce it? Enophile?
Enophile.
Enophile. He's an enophile. And what a great, my
What's
wife
that?
was mentioning, he's a
Wait,
wine
what's that?
connoisseur.
Oh, okay. Remember, I'm in
my wife-
Georgia. We don't know words like that down here. So
My favorite scene was when he went to order a pizza in Napoli, and they made they turn it over and make, what's it called when you,
Oh yeah, like calzone.
a calzone, but they deep fried it,
Yeah.
and they said this is a real pizza, and
then they ate it with a knife
the woman
and fork.
said to him, eat this and get fat, because he's really skinny.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing my wife was saying last night. She said, and she made me ask my friends at CNN how in the world he manages to eat all that food and not gain any weight, because the guy's really fit. But it's funny too, because there was a comment made about, I don't know if you remember that it was a big kerfuffle in New York when the mayor was videoed having a pizza in a restaurant in New York and eating it with a knife and fork. And people were going,
that was years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you go to Naples, that's how they eat pizza. And I'm told, because I haven't seen the show yet, I'm told that on the show that during the scene where they were eating pizza, they were eating it with a knife and fork. And so de Blasio came out a couple of days ago and said, see, if you watch the Stanley Tucci thing, you'll see I was eating pizza the right way. I don't know.
So
That's
given
not
that
very-
we're on the theme of TV, I have to promote Losing Alice, which is an Israeli show on Apple TV Plus, which which is it's basically about two women, one older, one younger. The older woman wants to be a screenwriter, but is a director, and the younger woman has written her first screenplay. And the husband of the older woman is a leading actor, and I'm only in episode 2, but it's a fantastic kind of mystery about the relationships between the three of them, done in Hebrew, but it's just fantastic.
That's so good about the way that streaming allows you to watch a show in an original language and then look at the subtitles, or switch over to a dubbed language and listen to it in the dubbed language and change the subtitles to another language. Anyway, Brent, you seem totally bored with this conversation.
No, I've got a big screen. I'm actually looking at us I'm watching Gilmore Gang in 4K splendor. So,
Ooh.
Yeah.
but I do have a question.
So you're
Keith,
not bored, you're fascinated.
yeah,
We can't tell
Keith,
the difference.
I want to ask Keith, how you doing, man? Last time we talked to you,
I before we came on air, I said I'm 98% recovered, and the 2% that I'm not prepared to add is to give me some space to be a whinging whiner at home, so I can pretend I can't do the washing up. I'm still sick.
What does whinging mean?
Whinging is the same as whining.
Right. So
Wow.
a whinging whiner is a double.
A whinging whiner, nothing to do with Dave Weiner, Dave, if you're listening. A whinging whiner is just a beautiful use of language.
Isn't it Australian?
I don't know the root. We use it in the UK, but I don't know.
I've only heard it from Australians, but I don't know a lot of people.
Well, I've heard it
I know
from many
Frank.
British friends. It's pretty common, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Hey,
So
breaking
how
news.
does everybody think this sticking to one topic is going?
Yeah, not good.
We should move on.
Yeah, audience, just
Not
to
good.
apologize.
We should
That
move
was
on.
a private conversation between the 6 of us. Well, at least 4 of us, anyway.
And scene. I actually am kind of in a perverse way enjoying this
Why perverse?
because there's a very subtle emotional timber to it, and when Brent, who had no suggestions for anything to talk about that he was interested in, actually interrupted this conversation to say something, I thought we had reached this epiphany in this very
Linear?
it's not linear. It's just like, when they have the political.
Boring.
it's not linear, but he's doing this.
Yeah, I know. So not linear, but it's
Flatline is the word you're looking for. Flatline.
flatline. Yeah, we got to the end because everyone died.
But just to give us a little added twist, I don't know if you noticed this week, Sony announced a new camera called the FX3 that is kind of slightly more expensive than a camera Blackmagic launched last week called the
6K Pro.
The 6K Pro. They're both under $4,000. The Sony one uses Sony lenses. The Blackmagic one uses Canon lenses from regular cameras. And there's a glut now of movies made on iPhone 12. I honestly think that just awesome content is going to be produced by clever people who can now afford to do it and previously couldn't. And I think the big studios are going to have, in terms of great content, it won't all come from them anymore. Well, I don't know if it ever did, but it's going to be less and less. I think there's going to be really good content produced by regular people who can afford, to make something that costs $10,000, not even $100,000.
We were just speculating about
Be
this.
more competitive for scripts, which could shortchange the guys doing things independently. And if an independent has a script and he knows he can sell it for real money to a studio, bingo.
BBC did a series that Idris Elba was the star of, that was entirely shot on iPad.
Was that
within the
Turn Up
line-
Charlie thing?
No, no, it was an interesting. There's this technology that allows you to shoot green screen on iPad and put content behind you that you can actually manipulate on your computer. And it's
Eric
pretty
Schonfeld.
cool.
It's Eric Schonfeld's company. It's called Touch
Yeah.
something.
That's
Eric
it.
Schonfeld used to be the editor at TechCrunch. They
Oh,
raised
yeah.
a bunch of money last week.
Well, it's a fascinating technology. It works. There's a low end version of it that you can buy to shoot green screen and do some of it using your phone, and of course a quality phone like an iPhone 12 using that kind of software. I think it's called Touch Screen, as a matter of fact.
Touch screen, yeah. Touch
And
something.
it
Touch Studios,
yeah.
maybe.
And they did, basically, any one scene that you saw had so many layers behind it of things that you could go into by simply touching or moving your mouse and manipulating the imagery behind him, which was shot on a green screen and then of course post-produced and laid in later. It was really something. I saw a demonstration of it. I was blown away by it. I saw it in person, and then I saw it virtually again later. So you're absolutely right about the fact that the technology is creating a situation where if you've got great writing, you can actually produce good content.
Touchcast. Yeah, they launched it in 2013. So it's a slow burner. It's taken 7 years to get to where they are now.
Well, it's worth knowing about, I think.
So how long is it going to be before some independent outfit does a movie using all this cheap stuff, relatively speaking, and wins a major award like an Oscar? Do you see that coming?
Well, they're focused on virtual events. They're kind of like what Hopin is doing. They're trying to jump into that world, so they're not really focused on movie making.
But I think that Brent's right though. That I think it will happen.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Not necessarily with those guys, but I absolutely think that it will happen, and it could be on with the new Sony camera. It could be with that dog.
Stop it.
It could. This. Not everybody needs a Lessa or a Red camera anymore. You just don't.
They raised 55 million in Series A financing a couple of weeks ago.
Well, that's pretty good. So they're going to come back and make some noise.
Yeah.
Brent, what do you think about the question you asked?
No, why don't you take a stab at it? Why don't you answer that one?
Yeah, I think that it's been going on for a few years. Steven Soderbergh, who's a talented but stays away from the big movies director, has been shooting on iPhone intermittently for the last 4 or 5 years.
Even Michael Bay did an iPhone film not too long ago, a big action adventure iPhone movie.
Well, they can put like 10 iPhones around an explosion scene or a car chase and get, way more angles. And some of them can be doing slow-mo, some of them can be doing fast, the speed up thing. It gives you a lot of flexibility at low cost.
But remember, the camera is only one element of production. There's a whole range of services involving design and casting and lighting, costume, makeup. So just having cheaper cameras doesn't completely change the equation.
So to the other part of your question, Brent, winning an Oscar, Frank, what is the percentage, total percentage, or the incremental percentage of marketing dollars for a major Hollywood film? As compared to the
No,
so
it's
$40 million on
it's
$60 million film.
It's 50% and up on a big movie. when they decide that that's what they
Yeah,
want to.
It used to be, last time I checked, it was equivalent to the production budget.
Yeah.
Take your production budget and double it, and that's your marketing budget.
Depend,
So
it,
there's
and
your
it
answer.
totally depends on the studio's decision as to whether or not they want to sink that money into that, because they think it's got legs.
But those decisions are made before the film is greenlight.
Yeah.
The first analysis is how much money can we make on this property? You back out from there. If we can make this much money, how much can we spend? How much do we need to spend on production, on cast, and how much do we need to spend on marketing? So
they're not always
answers
right.
are all made up front, not at the end of the game.
They're not always right. As
They never
you know. Take a look at the Wonder Woman movie. It's a good example of it.
So does that
as a-
answer
as
your
a
question,
loser.
Brent?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, just out of interest, Brent, have you thought about using iPhones as your cameras for what you do?
Well, now that the ATEM Mini Extreme is out with the 8 HDMI inputs, it does open up some interesting possibilities.
So you would take the fire out of an iPhone and HDMI into it into a coupler that would then, yeah, it sounds like a pretty cool thing.
Yep, you
Gonna
use one
show
of
it?
these guys, and it's really nice and easy to do.
Yeah.
What is that? What did you just show us?
HDMI to USB-C connector.
And yet, while we're doing connectors, everyone should get one of these. This is iPhone to regular phone, stereo jack, which means that you can get the audio out of your iPhone into anything that can record.
Yep, I got one of those too. Somewhere.
Hey, audio out to anything that can record. That sounds like a way to record Clubhouse.
No.
Well,
I was wondering when we were going to get around to that.
It does. Sounds to me like a way to record Clubhouse.
No.
Boom.
Point. What's your point? I mean, last night was an incredible Clubhouse moment from my perspective.
it was
Well,
interesting. There was a whole. Which one were you thinking of, Steve?
Well, I was trying to listen to what is basically my favorite political show on MSNBC, which is Lawrence O'Donnell,
Yeah, I like him.
former executive producer of The West Wing. And he was talking with John Heilman, who I consider to be the most authoritative and interesting political commentator around. And so I wanted to listen to that. And yet on Clubhouse, this room opened up with a conversation about some of the stuff that we've been, at least I've been somewhat fixated on for the last few months, namely newsletters and Clubhouse, and what are the implications of this intersection of, the power to create whatever this is
Who was it with?
on the part of, anybody. This kind of on-ramp to what is effectively major league production values. What is that all about? And so this conversation was hosted by a former TechCrunch editor, Josh Constein. Is that his name? Yeah. And the guests were the editor,
The information.
founder of The Information, which is
Jessica Lessin.
and
Oh,
that's
she's
effective-
great.
Yeah, and that's effectively a super newsletter from my perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, not
Well-
super as in wow, but super. Let me just say what the show was, because my producer is asking me to say who the people were, and several other people from independent agencies who I wasn't familiar with, but they were basically doing newsletters inside of a semi-corporate environment. Ben Thompson, who is probably the leading the tip of the spear in terms of moving from wherever he was, which was basically a consultant, to moving into the newsletter space. He's got a very authoritative column that he produces, and a couple of other people. It was just this thing sort of popped up and just put together absolutely the most authoritative information about the subject. And I was just basically, I couldn't record, or at least they don't want you to apparently record that conversation. I didn't really want to record it so much as just being able to pause it so that I could. Instead, I had to pause John Heilman, and by the time the newsletter conversation was over, I didn't care what John Heilman had to say anymore.
But see, if you recorded it and listened to it later, you could have paused it and started. I mean, is it? There's a question then about whether or not you want to be a part of that live conversation, which I guess you do.
No, I didn't. I like the feel of it being live. I think that, it's like radio in the old days. You didn't.
Well,
you didn't,
but so
you
if
didn't
you record a live show and you listen to it later, is it not still live?
But I think what they're going to do, Frank, is if recording becomes a feature, they will own it, and they will own the on-demand. There'll be YouTube meets Twitter for audio. So why?
Well, I think it's. I don't think that's going to happen. I right now it's a feature of the product that they don't record, and I think. There's some noise about the same time as this was happening. Tina noticed that there was a Twitter conversation with Jim Cramer of The Street,
Mad Money,
CNBC,
Mad Money.
Yeah,
and they were doing something on the Twitter Spaces platform, which isn't released yet. So, there's going to be a fight here. And I think that Twitter probably will allow recording on some level. And my bet is that won't push Clubhouse into recording.
I think Clubhouse will cave.
I think that eventually it's going to be a moot point, because if you're not trying to publish or republish something, it's going to be a fair use issue, essentially like the DVR was, or the video recorder was back in the day, where they didn't care what you were doing in the privacy of your own home, if the level of quality was such that you could pirate it, then they cared a big deal.
Grateful Dead.
Yeah. And,
so
Tina makes one other point, and then sorry to filibuster here. Got that one.
Let's kill the filibuster, please.
Well, all right, forget it.
No, filibuster away.
All right, forget it. Dennis, how are we doing on political discussion?
Dennis's new newsletter, which I just signed up for.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
I didn't even find out about it, Dennis. How do you sign up for it?
It's Nuzzle. I'm learning how to do it. I think I invite you.
Okay.
And I don't have your email. So
Keith at tier.com. It's my name.
It's in the
my
Gilmore
name,
Gang Telegram, Keith. It's in Telegram in the back.
Oh, okay.
You can just click on the link that says subscribe.
You mean our real-time newsletter feed?
So it's just it's just focused on sustainability. So I'm looking at energy alternatives beyond solar and wind, electric cars, geothermal energy production, and open ocean iron fertilization.
You should look at AgTech as well. Go and look at infarm.com.
Okay.
Infarm.com. It's vertical farming, hydroponics, carbon positive.
That could be very useful in desert regions, I suspect, especially if you could irrigate carefully using desalinated seawater.
What do you think of hydrogen batteries?
I hear they're going to be good for trucks.
I hear that they're also going to be good for like in desert areas where they need large amounts of power using small block batteries that are put together either in series or sequence to help power a neighborhood, for example.
Yeah.
I just don't know. Are they safe? I have no idea.
Honestly,
Hydrogen
I've been
fuel
watching
cells,
hydrogen
Are you
for
talking about
50
fuel
years,
cells?
and I'm not really a fan. A
Of
couple
what?
Hmm?
Not
not-
really a fan of what?
Hydrogen.
Hydrogen batteries, but
Yeah.
they're fuel cells, I guess, right? Michael?
Exactly. Exactly.
This is a technology that goes back decades and decades.
Jesus.
Has something changed recently to make them more viable?
There's been a lot of
money
stories about
going
it
into
recently.
them, but there are some fundamentals that you can't get over. One of which is that hydrogen is not compressible. You can compress it all. You can try to pressurize it all you want, but you can't change it from a gas very easily at all to a liquid or to a solid. It liquefies very close to absolute zero, and in order to get it, you have to strip it off of something else, which requires a great deal of energy. When you put it in a tank and drive around with it, you basically got a bomb on wheels.
But not in a battery though, right? Yes, no, I don't know. I mean, it just the reason I brought it up, Michael, was because there's been a number of stories about the hydrogen batteries of late that I've read.
Battery needs a supply of fuel, and the fuel has to be put in a tank. So you can't divorce the battery from the fuel. The energy solution that I'm very high on is called enhanced geothermal production. Basically, you drill a hole a couple miles deep and fracture the earth underneath it. And then you drill another hole and pour water down one hole and pull up superheated steam from the other. And that drives a power plant. And this was all in a report that I have here from MIT, produced in about 2006. And the report says that there's enough geothermal energy under the Rocky Mountains to supply all of our energy needs 1,000 times over. And it's good for a long, long time because it's basically using the Earth as a nuclear reactor. The core of the Earth is molten. It's very hot. It's radioactive, and heat dissipates through the mantle. So you're just tapping into what's already there.
So what's your guess about how effective that solution will be given the intransigence of the Republican Party?
Well, there have been a lot of news items in the last week of companies like Chevron, for example, investing heavily in it. And the city of San Francisco gets about half of its electric power from geothermal vents in Sonoma County. There's a company up there that's publicly traded called Calpine that generates about 750 megawatts. All of it doesn't go to San Francisco, but they're doing it in, I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, they're doing it in Iceland, they're doing it in Italy, they're doing it in Hawaii, they're doing it in New Zealand, Australia. I get a regular feed in my mailbox of just geothermal activity around the Earth, and it's quite substantial. So that solves the basic problem of baseload power consumption. And if you can do that, then the whole idea of batteries and hydrogen, or anything battery-wise, becomes very expensive.
Wasn't the concept of the water engine just a way of releasing hydrogen from water?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
It was a great movie called The Water Engine.
Okay.
That was,
I think originally a radio play.
Was it?
Originally a radio play.
A great story about how this guy had created an engine that ran on water that was going to put the automobile business, the combustion engine, out of business. And the story was about how he got shut down. It's an amazing story, but it made me think, because in college, one of the experiments that they had us do was how to extract hydrogen from water, and then utilize it to make a miniature explosion, which we did in the lab. And it made me think that must be what that concept is. It wasn't expensive to do. Actually, the only additional element other than water that it required was sand, to use as something that you superheated, so that as the vapor went through the sand, it extracted the oxygen and separated the oxygen from the hydrogen. Anyway, that just seems like another forgotten technology.
I did that lab too. It was fun.
Yeah.
I remember
This reminds me of
high school science class where the teacher was absolutely mystified. He had set up an experiment to use electrolysis to separate water into hydrogen and oxygen. And the hydrogen was collecting and no oxygen was collecting. He was absolutely mystified why he was getting hydrogen, but no oxygen. And we tried to point out to him that
they burned off.
No, he was using iron as an electrode. And so it was immediately rusting the iron and not collecting as free oxygen.
Well, now that you mentioned that, when Frank was talking about the only other element, I said to myself, no, you really need some platinum or palladium for the electrodes.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not.
This was done with a Bunsen burner to heat a glass tube that was filled with sand.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Something else. Yeah, fun stuff.
There you go.
So yeah, not political at all. Let me just say that the CIA report on the Khashoggi killing is out, and MBS is still guilty.
They said it out loud, what we all knew.
Right. I'm
He's
glad.
still good friends with Jared Kushner.
What will be the repercussions of that? What's the next step? I mean, it's clearly Biden has knew this and didn't call MBS, called the king instead. But what happens next?
Well, my immediate thought just before you answer this is the CIA is exposing a state for killing a state enemy. It appears to be the pot calling the kettle black.
Well, yes, but
yeah,
appears so. Appears so.
Well, I don't know that you're getting into relativism, and I think Joe Biden has a right to his own relativism. I don't think that's it. I think he's trying to isolate MBS before he can do, I think, more egregious harm to the East-West relationship. I think that's the primary thing.
Yep.
What do you think, Brent?
Well, let's see. Wow. We're coming up on that 60-minute mark, aren't we?
What do you think of platinum?
You know what? Let's talk.
Do you ever wonder why I do this show? And do you ever wonder what it is that I do when I do this show?
What do you do? Let's talk about LL Cool J having that song out 30 years ago. Let's talk about the hip hop world in New York.
But,
I had asked you if you'd known about John King and Chung King Studios, something that Steve and I have some experience with back in the 80s. Are you familiar with those guys by any chance?
Yeah. I don't know them first name basis, but yeah, I know about that. I was just marveling. It feels like it should be. Mama said, "Wake you up."
And what does that mean?
So no, Brent. To be serious,
I want
to
to
be serious. I want to. I want to know if he's
Understand what
going
he just said before you.
No, I'm just having fun, guys.
I know.
I
don't understand.
I think it's a really interesting discussion, but I just the energy thing, I just don't have a lot of basis to talk about it because I don't know much about it. So
He's falling asleep. But what I want to know, Brent, is are you going to use Clubhouse for your stuff? And how are you thinking about this new kind of creator platforms that are coming about in terms of how you're going to deliver what you do to the world? Is it making you think you're going to change anything?
I think you got to be open to the possibilities, but I joke a lot about Clubhouse. It's only because I hate all the hype around it. There's some really interesting things technology wise, really some interesting things with it. I want to see what this Twitter, what's it called again? Twitter
Spaces.
So yeah, Twitter Spaces. I eventually think somebody is either Clubhouse is gonna make its money, get out there and get IPO, or they don't have a big window of time before these bigger platforms just suck in the technology and integrate it into their platforms. Because, but honestly, Clubhouse as a standalone, I don't think it has a big shelf life for it.
But they're going to SPAC it before they IPO it probably. But interesting thing with Twitter though, this whole new thing about Twitter creating a situation where the super Twitter fans they may separate in a paywall, and I wonder if in that thinking that their version of Clubhouse might somehow fall in a place behind that paywall, which automatically monetizes their version of Clubhouse. And if so, then don't they beat Clubhouse to the monetization forefront?
I think it's, Clubhouse is not out of the woods in terms of really being able to capitalize on what they've done. Give them credit. I mean, they've made everybody talk about them, and everybody seems to want to be involved in it. And I just don't think they're out of the woods. I think these other platforms, you're already starting to see them add this component to their platform. It could be Clubhouse evangelizing this new, social audio, whatever. But the real benefits are for somebody else in long term.
I agree that they're not out of the woods, but I think that the competition is creating the woods that they're all going to prosper in. I mean, I think that the innovation is already there. I don't think this is a technology story per se, as in many cases, it's what happens with the technology that is the innovation.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree totally.
It's the golden age for creation and coming up because it's cheap, readily available, powerful. It's going to be integrated. That Twitter super follow integrates audio. By the way, they're closing down that thing they bought, Periscope.
Yeah.
They're integrating that into Twitter, I assume.
So Twitter Spaces will take the place of Periscope.
I assume that that's true. So people like ourselves, who are using Zoom here and streaming, the range of tools we're going to have available to us and how many different elements they integrate is just going to get better and better and better. And that's going to stretch all the way from, conversational stuff like this, all the way through to making Hollywood movies with iPhones.
Yeah, but at the risk of stopping this circular back to the same thing that we talked about half an hour ago, the impact of this shift, whether you call it Clubhouse or whether you call it newsletters or whether you call it, etc., the impact of this is going to rival or perhaps dwarf the impact of blogs and so-called podcasts, which are an extension of blogs, 20 years ago. So this is the Big Bang going off again.
Yeah,
so,
someone told me
yesterday. Let me hear. I don't mean to interrupt you, Keith, but I want to hear not only what you have to say, but others. Let me hear what people think this Big Bang has. What are the implications of it? Not about the technology, but about the use of the technology. I'll start with Michael Markman.
I find it hard to put them all in one bag. I mean, they are in one bag in the sense that they're a way of turning attention and using people's time or using up people's time. But I think Clubhouse is onto something neat in terms of the social interaction that they managed to foster through the combination of their feature set, their design, and the initial group of people who've established a culture of Clubhouse. The style of Clubhouse is remarkable, and it's you can duplicate the feature set, how easily you can capture the culture. The Twitter culture is very different from the Clubhouse culture. The Twitter culture is snipey, snippy, lots of people piling on to other people. The conversational culture in Clubhouse is something that I don't think I've seen in any other form of social media. And it's really remarkable and very attractive.
Frank.
Well, as you were saying that, Michael, I was thinking in my mind's eye that if you took the video away from this call, that's a Clubhouse room, first of all, and second of all, I see it's just something I've been thinking about lately, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to express it very well, but I see all of these technologies coming together in a very powerful way. So right now we've got a bunch of disparate tools, and all of these tools can be used by a lot of different people, a bunch of different ways. But at some point, I think many of these tools will come together and create something new that will be bigger and will be useful to people as a tool, as a way of entertaining. I actually thought that, a lot of what we've been talking about, imagine if it was controlled by voice, especially using the voice assistants that have video assist to them. It just seems to me that we're in this funnel, and these big ideas are starting to coalesce and become something that's going to be, I don't want to say one idea, but it's something that's bubbling around in my head, and I can't get my head around it yet, but it's something I'm thinking about, and I think that there's something to it. But Brent, you were nodding your head there. I was.
No, I think I agree with that. I think, this actually goes back to the conversation I had with Keith when I did a little one-on-one with him around all these different. There may be different tools and it may be different, pieces of the puzzle, but each of them is not the puzzle in itself. And it's really up to the individual to figure out which pieces do you use to create the puzzle that you're hoping to put together for the audience that you're looking for. So, the audio, social audio, I hate that term, but whatever that is, it's a lane. I don't think it's a lane that will cut out any of the other lanes. It's just another lane. It's like, have we stopped using the phone? No. Some people even still have rotary phones, for crying out loud. But you're using the phone along with email, and then we thought email was going to go away when something else happened. We're sending just as much email as we were before, but we're also doing all sorts of other social activities to communicate.
Well, I agree with you, Brent, that nothing goes away, but the mix changes radically. I mean, radio in the 1930s, the 1950s, the 1980s is very different from radio today, where a lot of radio has been supplanted by streams. People don't turn on the radio. Maybe they do in the car, perhaps. But
I think broadcast radio has been supplanted by streams because now everybody can stream. Before, you only had a couple of options to listen to.
Right. But
now,
we still have radio.
Boy, even in the car, you're streaming.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, it's not a technical story, at least in my opinion. It's last night, the Clubhouse in that particular conversation was competing directly with MSNBC worldwide.
Right. Well, you only have so many waking hours a day.
That's right. So you have a choice.
You do so many things at one time, and I would argue you can't do more than one thing at a time.
But to me, the size of the audience. First of all, I couldn't get in for the most part to the big cattle call clubhouse things with Andreessen and Elon Musk, because they were maxed out. Their platform couldn't handle the volume. But this conversation, I was basically just checking my email, and I noticed this notification about this. And the key indication of what was transcendental about this was the fact that there were only 1,000 people in that conversation. Not
Only?
But,
yeah,
but that-
Yeah.
but my
You know,
kinda
Steve, you make
There's-
a really good point, though. I think, interestingly enough, you're talking about notifications, and how they are being very effective utilizing notifications to bring you into their tent.
Yeah, that's one of the key attributes of this of what Clubhouse is doing, and I suspect that it'll be a key attribute of what Twitter does, and so on. Those are feature functions, but the robust yet not oversold environment is the key to what this market is going to bring. It's not a blockbuster, and it's not a small movie. It's somewhere in between.
It's Steve. It's a great example of what I have always called the unborn child. If you go through the features of Clubhouse, every single feature existed before, and what they've done is uniquely put together all, as Michael was saying, the right set of combination of features and implementation to create a platform on which, firstly, all of those great people could come together immediately. Two, we could all know they were coming together immediately. And three, we could, with a single touch, join immediately. And if we put our hands up, even speak, which is the one new feature that...
Well, I agree with you about everything except that last point, but go ahead. It's not about putting your hand up.
For some people,
Well, for some, not for you. But for some people,
Nobody
dogmatic
put their,
about that, Steve.
it was a 2-hour conversation. Nobody put their hand up. I mean,
For some people,
of course.
it is a feature that people find useful. Some moderators block it. You have that opportunity too. You can disallow people.
The nature of the event.
I didn't get
Go
a chance
ahead.
to weigh in. I think the thing we're not looking at is purpose, the purpose of these different things. And if you develop a sliding scale from social to informational, some things are impromptu, off the cuff. When you start talking about blogs and podcasts and things, there's a great deal of forethought that goes into making that communication. And without understanding that, I don't think you can apply any new technology, i.e. without first saying this technology would be good for a socialized interaction. This technology would be good for something that requires thought and preparation. It's the difference between a talk show and a blockbuster movie.
Well, just rewind time to the invention of movie type. What was that good for? It was good for everything.
Say that again. You're
For
blocking.
everything. It was good for putting up wanted posters. It was good for printing books, pamphlets. It was good for political organizing. It was good for just pastimes, reading novels. It was good
Invention
for
of moving
instruction.
type is what he said.
Moving type.
Any medium is going to be available to whatever purposes people put it to.
it's a
I
platform.
don't agree.
It's a platform, it's not a service, it's a platform.
I'm intrigued, though, Dennis, by what you were saying.
Something better comes along.
Well,
which is
what you were saying.
Radio dominated entertainment in the 1930s and 40s, and just about went out of business by the time the 60s came along with Gunsmoke and all the rest of that stuff. The niche for that technology, i.e. radio, shrank dramatically. But yes, as somebody mentioned earlier, it's still around. So I would imagine that you've got a spectrum of technologies here. Social media seems to have dominated the last 10 or 15 years, but its niche is probably going to shrink.
I think the idea that a lot of these things are going to come together and coalesce makes a lot of sense moving forward. And but I liked what you were saying, Dennis, about a blog is something that you had to think about and put together and then release, whereas a Clubhouse conversation like what we're doing now is something that is spontaneous. So it's different. All of them are different, yet they are kind of all the same in a sort of an odd way. And I find that to be very interesting. Look, if you think about the Firestein Theater was a great example of taking, their kind of comedy and taking what was an old style of a radio show and then having a guy like Steve produce it into a record that was then released in stores.
No, I came along later. They did that.
But you did some of that with them anyway. But yes, I thought that what they did was amazing. And that was, there were at least two things that were put together. And I remember thinking that I could see everything that I heard when I listened to one of their productions. And that was a way of sort of bringing sort of three worlds together for me anyway.
Well, that's the magic
they were building on the conventions of radio drama in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
But you can't deny the fact that
they were building it and perverting it for new purposes and adding a little weed to it.
Yeah, we love.
By the way, there is a great
Dennis. What did you say? I just wanted to hear what Dennis said.
You can't deny that that's an example of how the niche shrank to a specialty niche of a recording compared to a daily radio broadcast 30 years earlier.
And in that,
they also had their radio broadcast. They were doing it on the air spontaneously before they were formalizing it on recordings.
So I'm going to throw a thing out for everybody to know about. There's a thing online called Radio Retropolis, which a friend of mine out in LA puts together, and it literally is all these great old radio shows that you can now go and access online. Radio Retropolis. It's really something. I've been stuck on the original Superman radio shows. It's just crazy. Anyway,
but what we're really saying, and Dennis is saying this as well, I think, is the internet is really it's eating the world. Let's say any media type, any individual or group who wants to address themselves or an audience, increasing the internet is giving them the tools to do it and manifesting their content in new ways. And I'm finding I'm reading, I'm not reading what I used to read before. Now I'm reading Not Boring by Packy McCormick. I'm reading Protocol. I'm reading Wired more because they're doing a decent job of reinventing themselves for this new era through Medium, actually. And now I'm listening to people I didn't listen to before, like Josh Constantine. I would have to go to a conference to listen to Josh. Now I can.
That was one of the most effective things that they did on this show. Is that I came in maybe 40 minutes late to this conversation because I didn't notice the notification until then. But at the end, Josh basically put on his reporter hat and just described extremely succinctly, but also very in depth, what had been talked about on the show. So it was kind of like, having a recorder that I went and played back, but it was even better than that because he put it into some context and then he was in control of the so-called moderating. It just was a very efficient use of his skill set while giving the people in the room, and I'm not talking about the audience, the people on the stage, as they call it, the opportunity to basically disagree with each other, which does remind us a lot of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So, and have been for 20 years or whatever it is.
Although the difference, Frank said this is, if you turned off the video, this would be Clubhouse, but with one exception. which is our audience, we can't see who it is, and if they did want to join, they couldn't. Even if we would, there's no way for us to allow them to.
Well, that doesn't mean that we're not going to do something on Clubhouse or open up Zoom, or there are a number of alternatives that we have to that. But I don't think that the story right now is the audience. I think the story is what is being created that the audience then will participate in. And we're in that phase. We're not in the phase of this being a technology leap where people can just join. The secret of Zoom, in my opinion, is that everybody's got the client. They're already installed. And it's not difficult to be able to follow the directions to be able to join in.
Mm-hmm.
It's an editorial decision whether you get to join in or not. And that's what we're seeing with Clubhouse. But the platform has enabled the leading up to what is about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question that the various internet platforms have done something to lower the barrier between presenter and audience. It's much more fluid now. Anybody who is an audience member can also be a presenter. If you were a radio listener in the 40s, you couldn't get your own radio show. If you are a participant now on any social media, on YouTube, you can watch, you can make. The barriers have come down, and also the ability to communicate to the people who used to be on some kind of isolated platform have come down. So things are much more fluid than they used to be.
And I just want to remind everybody about the beginning comments by Frank about blockbusters. Yesterday, I watched the second in a series of CRM panels with leading vendors in the space that Brent Leary and his partner Paul Greenberg broadcast yesterday, and it continues to be fascinating how these so-called niche audiences are starting to emerge as the value center of these platforms. In other words, it's not a broadcast, it's not a blockbuster kind of model. It's something else that is smaller, but in aggregate, through bundling, aka newsletters, is becoming an economic powerhouse.
I think
So
this
I'm
goes
going to
back
admit
to Anderson's long tail thesis a long time ago, that there is as much volume in the long tail of small audiences as there is in the blockbusters.
Yeah, but volume and quality are separate things.
I'm going to admit for a second here that I watched the Tamron Hall show over here in London. And she had a show on yesterday that was about people who were online performing, whether they were acting or singing or whatever it was they were doing, entertaining, and how those people had eventually broken into the mainstream and created something much bigger. You couldn't do any of that before the internet happened. You couldn't make a record and get people to listen to it. You couldn't make a movie. You certainly couldn't get on Broadway. But now you can perform. If you blow them away online, you might end up with a record contract or in a movie or on Broadway. It's very interesting, and it's just another part of the ecosystem in the entertainment world.
Okay, I'm going to use
YouTube and TikTok are the vaudeville of today. It's where you can start out being bad, be good, and then get noticed.
I'm going to use the fact that Brent has a hard stop in a few minutes to wrap this one up. So let's go around the horn quickly, starting with Brent. Any thoughts?
I really enjoyed this last 30 minutes. The other 30 minutes was good. This got interesting. It was just really fascinating to hear you guys, your perspective on Clubhouse, because It's just a little bit different from mine, but I can see it, and I agree with some of your. It kind of helps me to form a little different opinion of it. I still don't think it's going to be a standalone, and I think Steve, you're right. It's not about the technology. It's really about it's still about people. All this stuff is really about people and how people interact with people and how they want to interact with people. That's the
Frank.
big story there. So.
I agree with Brent. I think that it's critical and key that if you're going to go after using all of these tools to do whatever it is you end up doing, that you keep one thing in mind, and that is keep it simple and focus. Focus on what it is you intend to get on the other end of your use of these tools. So use the tools, use all of them, use some of them, but focus on what it is you know best and how you can utilize these tools to create in the end what it is you need to create in order for you to succeed.
Dennis.
I still think it's springtime for idiots in Washington.
Well, it sounds like that's something you know well.
Yeah, I'm in the union.
Keith.
You know, if I could invest $1,000 in Clubhouse or $1,000 in Twitter today based on the future, Clubhouse is going to win. Clubhouse is at least a year ahead software-wise. A year from now, it'll be probably 3 years ahead. Twitter's ability to execute has always been questionable. It's certainly going to produce something interesting that I'm going to want to use. So I'm not writing Twitter off. I'm just saying Clubhouse has everything to lose and probably won't lose it in that particular space. I do think that if we move our vision to about 5 years from now, somebody is going to be the Adobe Creative Cloud of this creator space that puts basically all of the things we need into made available to us. It could be Hopin, it could be StreamYard, it could be Restream, it could be Twitter, it could be.
Okay, but we haven't got enough time.
Yeah.
Michael.
You know, it as always, social media is two words: social and media, and it's going to be a combination of the platform capabilities and the creative community that they attract and the audience they attract. It's not all in the tech. You know, they used to say content was king. I think conversation now is king and community is king.
I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gilmore.
Hey.
I want to thank Dennis Pombriant.
Love that tie, by the way, that shoestring tie.
Thank you. It's me, don't you think? It's the essential me.
Get the 10-gallon hat out.
Michael, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you all.
Keith's here. Thank you, sir.
You are who you wear.
What?
You are who you wear.
Oh.
It's a Dennis reference.
Brent Leary, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And Frank Radis.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks, Steve. And Tina.
Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time, because there will be a next time.
Ooh.
Wow, he's committing. He's committed. All right.
Promise or a threat?
What have I got to lose?
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.